So it's the spring of 1863 and things look very bleak for the Union. You can see why in previous videos. The choices were to go primary in the east. They've chosen to do the same again this time. Commerce raiders beginning to add up. Still not very good rolls. 11 total ships sunk. The U.S. or the Union certainly is not playing to try to sink those suckers. They've got far bigger problems on their plate. At some point in the game, it becomes worth trying to, I guess, just because you don't have much to do with your navies. Now, I don't have a lot that I want to do with my navies right now, so maybe it's of value, but then again, maybe the navies would be valuable. Basically, normally, you're using your navies on the Mississippi. You're using your navies to make some landings. Now, on the Mississippi, I have nothing I can do with my navies. The Army on the Mississippi is, the Army in the West is just in such bad shape, in so much the wrong place. Yet still there is the opportunity to make landings, and those might happen. Which is why I'm not spending on them. Plus, I can keep bringing in additional ships, which is what happened last turn, and maybe it'll happen this turn with my CPs. The reason I haven't done any landings is those landings wouldn't be enough. They might be enough to have kind of drifted the score so that it wasn't a Confederate substantial victory last turn, which it would have been, given had we stopped on that turn. But I don't want to waste the manpower at this point to take over things that aren't going to matter. I don't have the imports level anywhere near 100 yet. Yes, you build these up over time, but I have to be succeeding somewhere for it to make sense, and I don't want to spend the manpower that I need to use elsewhere. That's at least my feeling on it. It's always a tough call to expend the resources to make those landings, though. But you have to make them at some point or another. I just haven't been doing it much. The one that I made down here at Fort Fisher, Buell is stuck down there and doesn't really have anywhere he can go. He could drift out here and take some actions, but I've got other things to do in the east. Taking cities is not my prime goal right now, even though it would hurt the Confederates eventually. The biggest thing is if I can figure out a way to take the Mississippi in this game. I've gotten so hosed by that I would view, if the Union can just split the Confederacy in this game and win the election, I'd take it as a sort of a moral victory. I don't have any illusions that I can win the whole thing. In fact, I think what I'm looking at is probably too hard for the game. But normally, the difference between that turn 17 election, all the victory point marks that you hit up until and after that really are not that hard until you hit the final end of game one, and then that one just usually befuddles me as to how do you make that gain if you think you've been hitting all your marks. We're not going to see that this game, though. Alright, let's get going with some of the pulses. After a couple of actions, we see Lyons run down to the Gulf. He's now in supply, but Lee's keeping contact with him. The danger here, of course, is Mobile. New Orleans is a little tough to take. First of all, there's some defense troops there in a fortress. But for Mobile, the problem is the Union could, now that they're in supply, once they recover, 1, 2, 3, 4, and overtake both hexes, and kind of position themselves. I had forgotten about the Mississippi militia. I don't know if I remembered about Tennessee's militia and whether they have them, but Mississippi's militia I ended up adding to Lee's force. They could have placed themselves in Jackson and prevented that from falling. Of course, the Union could have just gone around it. No biggie there. The other biggie, McClellan's been removed from command and Sherman is in charge on the peninsula. That's a nice situation. However, unless I get a lot more command points this turn, I'm not going to really be able to take advantage of it right now. Big amount of points available. The Union didn't have enough command points, though, to take advantage of it in any one theater. So what they ended up doing was a naval attack down here on Plymouth. They sent McPherson in with Admiral Porter, and well, they took the hacks, but McPherson got injured, so he's over here, no longer available to lead. So I had to spend another command point. One I didn't want to spend in the east, because that means I can't recover with Sherman to send another general down there. He'll be enough to command whatever force it is. The threat that this provided caused the Confederates to throw some troops into Petersburg. The thing they don't want to have happen is have the Virginia salient more or less cut off by multiple directions. That would throw them into where they'd have to really withdraw from it, or at least give up and let the Peninsular Campaign be in a position to threaten Richmond. Right now it really isn't. They're bottled up down there. And I've got Jackson here. He did an attack and a recovery. It didn't do any good. And we're kind of winding down in the turn if I don't get a doubles. And with no additional CP markers, the springtime is over. And we move into April. What? No. May. Okay. And this is the first of the summer turns. Got a few issues here. A couple of Union units that were left demoralized. Jackson got the edge on Curtis right now. He's got like 3 strength points to 1. Curtis has no real replacements there. I don't really mind if he gets wiped out, except that cuts off my attempt to get around there. But there's not much I can do, except if I were forced to retreat, then I could maybe get into West Virginia and could start funneling troops into him. I could have built the Army of the James, but at this point, you don't want to do that, because unless I had a lot of points to pump into him. So things are looking not particularly better. It was just a hopeless situation, and I don't think there's any way around that. All right, well, we'll see what the next turn brings. All right, the silliness continues into May, June. Big roll for the Confederate shipping. I don't remember, 18 points or some such. Really did a lot there. Once we got a decent size action, the Union didn't have a lot to do. They marched down and took Mobile, but the Confederates have swept in and retaken it. I'm having trouble because, see, one of the things you want to do in this game is you want to kind of delay in the hopes that you get more command points. Now, the Confederates have a decent amount in the east, but the Union only have 4. 4's not enough to do twice with 1 unit. The Confederates had enough. Jackson could have wiped out Curtis, but they viewed the threat that Lyon's presenting back here to be much greater, and they want to make sure they hit him. Plus, he's already used up some of his CPs. He's down to the point where he can only rally, and that's the best he can do. Confederates can't do much more, but it's just kind of a, hey, pin them down before they can get dangerous and start marching across here. Because once a Union army under a leader like Lyons, Sherman, Grant is free in the South, they can do a lot of damage. It's a lot easier, though. It's tough to do when there's an army following you up and capturing what you take. So they got to kind of deal with each other to some extent. But not only would Mobile have fallen, which it did, but that's worth a significant amount of production points. But then I could take Pensacola and kind of position myself into a little sphere around here that I could work out of. Also, the longer I wait, the more Union reinforcements can get down there. So it seemed like a good idea to hit fast. Anyway, that's where we are. The last action was only a 3. This one was a 4. Now, a 4 meant a difference because that's enough that, say, Sherman over here could attack and recover. Well, he attacked and he successfully pushed his way forward towards the edge of Richmond. However, something terrible happened. and this is really unlikely, but he rolled his 2, and that puts Sherman in the wounded pile. Now, had he rolled a 7 afterwards, he'd be dead, and I'd never get a 4-star leader. But the fact that he was wounded in this battle, first of all, put a worse general in charge. Not much worse, but less initiative in Thomas, who just does not manage. You want those 2 initiative leaders. That's why Lyons is not bad, even though he's not ranked as quite as well in terms of Army command value, the middle number, as Grant or Sherman. He's got that high initiative. He works kind of nicely as a corps commander, as does Jackson. Jackson actually works well as an Army commander. I got to get him in charge of one somewhere. He should be in charge of the Northern Virginia, but he's busy doing his thing, and it cost me commands to remove Johnson. Anyway, Johnson used his 4 points, 3 of them to rally his forces, and Thomas did not have enough to do the rally. The Union instead rallied Lyons, which isn't terribly important because neither side has enough CPs to get into to come into grips there. The Union does not have enough left. It has enough to rally Thomas's army, but it doesn't have enough to come to grips over Richmond at this point. But interesting stuff could happen up there. And now we're at the end of that turn as well. That was the May-June. We're pushing our way into July, August, further into the summer. What have we seen? The biggest probably action we saw is Jackson finished Curtis off, and he's marched up the valley, and now he's threatening Washington. Doesn't have enough forces to take Washington probably, although actually there's very little there, but he doesn't know that. But he does have enough to cut the Washington rail line. Now, that's worth a couple of victory points a turn that the situation lasts, which means the Union's in a lot of danger there. Not sure I want to have Thomas's army get out of there, but I think I want to create something to try to face Jackson over in Maryland, Pennsylvania, wherever he might invade. Elsewhere, everybody's kind of playing to do nothing. There weren't many points. You saw some action in the Trans-Mississippi, and it was pointed out to me that these Indians shouldn't have moved around in here, the civilized Indians. They can only come out with stand weighty. I remembered them being pretty useless, actually. I'm going to keep using them as they are because it would confuse things. But, for example, the Union put an extra ironclad up here after using its naval points. There was some far west stuff going on, nothing important. You know, the whole idea of trying to do a New Mexico campaign, I've tried that in some games. It is a total mistake. You have to work your way up with supply depots. You fight one combat, you lose a depot, so you got to start building new ones. It's just really, you have no supplies and you have no way of really handling the combat. It's just a drain. It's not worth the 2 points to concentrate there. And it's not worth the thought. I'd send somebody like Van Dorn out there because he could lead the troops and maybe rally them. But it's just terrible. Everywhere else, well, Lee rallied his forces, for example. Let's see if we can get another one in here on this same video. This is July, August, 63. I always have a tough time. I was down here and skipped over, forgot this Texas Ranger unit I could have played on the board. I have a tough time keeping my 2 turn tracks in alignment. I probably ought to put the far west stuff on there, but I don't know. I can't, you know, it seems appropriate that it goes here, so I just can't violate that. Yeah, it looks so damn hopeless for the year. Now I realize what I wanted to talk about. Reinforcements go down to almost nothing. We're just getting 1 each in the east and west. Union gets more for a little, little bursts of more, but the Confederates are pretty much tapped out. And this is, the war. This is what ends the war usually. This is what allows the Union to get their big breakthrough. But I don't know if it's going to happen here just because they've been so hammered in so many ways. But we'll see. between this and the production and the fact that CPs, the costs on all these items, goes up when the Confederates, get their production cut down, and especially in the Trans-Mississippi region, they just can do nothing anymore. Unfortunately for them, the Confederates got a big roll, 7 points. And why is that unfortunate? Well, they don't want to make the first move here. They don't want to cross the river. This is, I guess, the Alabama. I don't know if it's the Tombigbee or the Alabama there. They don't want to activate here, and first of all, they don't have enough to activate and recuperate in the Trans-Mississippi. They certainly don't want to waste anything up here unless the Union moves its force down from Albany, or New Albany, I think. Yeah. They don't want to engage here. They might want to build a fortress in Richmond. That is appealing, but they feel like Jackson cutting around, that's too bold. If they do that, now I tried doing this with the Army of Northern Virginia in one game and essentially lost it and said, well, wait, let's not do this because that's unfair. That's going to ruin the whole game. This game had no such turning point in it. It's just, I've had a really hard time trying to figure out where the Union got into this position other than using two armies at once early, which maybe I don't normally do. But if Jackson moves up here, he's putting himself at risk. That's not a terrible threat. I can survive that. But what I really wanted was him up here as the threat. Maybe force Thomas to pull back with a naval evacuation. With those 7 points, I'm not sure what to do. I just don't know. And essentially what I did was piddle them away. The Confederates did build their fortress. The naval unit here to help defend it, all kinds of stuff. Great. The Union needed to get out. They're seeing just this as being too cluttered. They can cross the York. They charged over, destroyed troops that were at Fredericksburg, and now they're next to Jackson. They built up some replacements there. Curtis is in charge now, which is a lot better than Howard, who I think was in charge before, although it may be Meckler, and I'm not sure which one outranks the other. Lots of reinforcements coming in. I was kind of drawing to get, although I couldn't use him this round, I couldn't use him with troops this round particularly. I was hoping to get Sherman so that I could get him back in charge of the army. But this just felt like it wasn't going anywhere. If I can destroy Jackson and move this back to where I'm advancing along the rail lines, I feel a little bit more comfortable. Does that open up Fort Monroe? Yeah. I don't know how big a deal that is. Probably the biggest thing is taking whatever leaders are piled up there. It's Butler and someone else like Banks or something that I really don't want in my pool. I got one loser in there already. I don't remember who, but I've got somebody I don't want in the Union pool, which is why I didn't just draw for the Army of the Potomac and try to get a quicker activation turnaround. I didn't want to make the attack on the fortress. Fort maybe, fortress no. And it's probably wise, the Army of Northern Virginia, not that I think there's any cav in the Potomac, so they didn't know this. I got all my calves stuck under Burnsides, I think. Next activation, the Union launches an attack up in the Trans-Miss, and it goes well for them. They've actually got Van Dorn down to just 1 strength point. They're at 2, though. It's not terribly great, but once they clear that, there's nothing here. So the Trans-Mississippi could actually all fall. Well, but it's a very slow process, so it might take more than the war. But Johnston tries to slip by Thomas, and he gets caught in the wilderness and hammered, taking 3 strength points to only 1 for Thomas now. Both forces are demoralized, so it's not as bad as it could be. Lots of reroll options going on there. Everybody used up their most. It's usually the case. But he was trying to get up there to add Jackson's force and add Jackson as a commander. He also left Beauregard, I think, or no, Bragg, back here in charge in Virginia so that he could relieve Johnston, maybe send him down as a subordinate to Lee, because he's still pretty decent, and have Jackson in charge and get that kind of better leadership in the East that I feel like I need. Lee is doing his job here. He's got lions to pin down, but I need another good leader in the East. And that is the end of this July-August turn. We're moving into the autumn now. What happened? Well, there weren't enough points for anything to happen in the East, really, except, drawing leaders and the like. But Lyon managed to slip by Lee here. Now, that was Lee's own fault. He kind of positioned himself here. He didn't want to put himself where he could be attacked, and Lyon just ran through, grabbed Mobile again, and now he's heading for New Orleans. We'll see if Lee can catch him. Van Dorn's disappearing here. His force, he's only got 1 strength point, so all those leaders go back in the pool, some of which are good, and one of which is Van Dorn. But mainly we were just kind of piddling points away, stretching things out as much as possible, which is quite often the case in this game. Did manage to get Sherman back in command. He ended up in Washington. I got things spilled over there. All right, we'll load this one up. Position-wise, not a lot's changed, but we no longer have the situations like the trap here or the trap here, but still, the Union is not in anything like good shape. Of course, far west, or the Trans-Mississippi, has been cleared, as far as I'm concerned, and now I can start moving things. I was wrong about there being a bad leader in the pile. It's often the case in this thing. Got Ord over here. We already discussed that, I think. I ended up with only Pleasanton left. It's hard to keep track of who your leaders are and where they belong, but I finally got a Cav leader, and that's important over here. So, up it goes.